All right, so could Kirby Smart lose another coordinator? It is not out of the realm of possibility that that could happen. Um, Glenn Schumann, who is Georgia's defensive coordinator, co-defensive coordinator with Will Muschamp, there's some interest there between the Eagles and Glenn Schumann, and this was first reported or tweeted by 680 The Fan in Atlanta, the radio station. Now, what becomes of this, we'll see. But I've been told that. Well, let me get to that in a second. First of all, Glenn Schumann is 32 years old, and when you talk to folks, they say, "Oh, well, is that enough experience to be a defensive coordinator in the NFL?" Brian Schottenheimer is an offensive coordinator in the NFL. Glenn Schumann is worlds better than Brian Schottenheimer ever thought about being on his best day. So yeah, he's totally qualified to do that job, and I think that if the Eagles offered him the job, he would take it. Okay, that's my suspicion. Obviously I talk sometimes to folks inside at Georgia, and that's their take too. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to understand that moving on to the NFL is an easier lifestyle, and the pay is going to be about the same, if not slightly better. Glenn would be a coordinator by himself for the first time. And if you look at the Eagles or the Eagles, um, what's happening is the NFL game is going more and more to college, and the Eagles are one of the teams that has franchises truly embraced this. I've talked about this in the past. I did not think Jalen Hurts was the correct fit to play quarterback in the NFL. Well, that was with the assumption that we would still be continuing to play the way the Eagles have always played, which is a pro style offense and all this stuff. Once you start changing the game to where the quarterback is a real weapon, like Lamar Jackson, or back in the day, Michael Vick, or, I mean, a little bit, he really doesn't do this, but Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, these guys can run. Patrick Mahomes. But Jalen Hurts is the next level guy. Well, the person that you are, Stetson Bennett, certainly, although not an NFL quarterback quite yet, right? So the thing about all of the people that I'm mentioning is uh, they are folks that you have to account for. And so what Glenn Schumann has gotten used to over his, I don't know, 7 years of time at Georgia specifically is the accounting of the quarterback. I mean, Glenn, couple things about Glenn Schumann. Hey, first of all, make sure you're signing up for our newsletter. We wrote about this yesterday. We can't get to these videos all the time. They're not our number one priority. Make sure that you're signing up for the newsletter. You won't miss out on this. The other thing is, I've got confetti now. I don't know how much longer I'm going to have it. When you order double dogs, also dog instructions available. But for Glenn Schumann, he came over with Kirby in 2016. Mel Tucker was the defensive coordinator for Kirby Smart, and Glenn Schumann was, someone who was on the staff at Alabama. Well, clearly, Kirby understands how to identify and develop coaching talent too. And you look at Mel Tucker, head coach. Who was the next defensive coordinator? Dan Lanning, who came in as the linebackers coach and was about the same age as Glenn Schumann. Well, now Dan is at Oregon. I mean, Oregon, Michigan State. These are major. These are top 25 programs. I mean, I think Oregon can be even higher than that considering some of the resources. And now for Glenn, I think the question becomes, and let me just set the record straight real quick. I could not confirm that Glenn had an interview with the Eagles. That was not something I was told happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm saying I cannot sit here and tell y'all that that is something that has happened, or it happened at the time of that interview at the time of that tweet from Dan. What I can tell you is my understanding is that there's some interest at minimum from the Eagles, and that it would be reciprocated from Dan if that's where it proceeds. But I don't know that Dan. I mean, I can't say that. Excuse me. That that Glenn Schumann has had an interview with the Eagles. I can't report that. So that's where we're at right now. It doesn't mean it's not true. Don't start all that. I know Dan, so it's not like this one of these things where I'm refuting his report. I'm not. I can't go there with it yet. So, um, for Glenn though, this is sort of a fork in the road. You know, I see Glenn Schumann eating dinner in Watkinsville. So, I mean, he's got a sort of normal life. I don't know that that would change if if he took a job with the Eagles or not. I don't know what the future would hold for him and his family. He's got a young family, and I don't know if that's the way that he wants to go in his coaching life. Glenn Schumann has been an outstanding recruiter for Georgia. That's the part that I think would hurt the most. Todd Monken was recruiting a, a player a cycle, something like that. He didn't have 10 guys. The challenge with losing Glenn would be you're talking about someone who's setting your defense. And the defense has been a very important part of what Georgia's done. I mean, Glenn has been a part of recruiting linebackers. There are typically 4 linebackers on the field for Georgia. There's a big difference between recruiting 8 guys in 2 cycles and recruiting 1 or 1.5 in 2 cycles. So this would be a significant thing. Now, I don't know what other folks are saying. A long time ago, I stopped reading other people's, discussions or thoughts, but I trust the folks that I talk to at Georgia. We'll see what happens with this. Um, I think if they offer him the job, he will take it. And I think it's that simple. And I think that anybody who is saying otherwise um, is trying to put a good face on this. And this is an opportunity to be one of the 32 defensive coordinators in the NFL, which means in 3 years, you could be a head coach in the NFL. Does it sound crazy? I mean, I don't think so. I think it's taken too long to get Thomas Brown a legitimate shot at a head coaching position. So, and TB's been in the league for an extended period of time. But the number one way to get where you want to go is by taking opportunities. Now, that doesn't mean that this is the right opportunity necessarily. And we don't know how serious this is, okay? Um, but it's not surprising that these things are popping up all over the place for Georgia coaches. I mean, seriously, in the last couple of years, you've had, Dan Lanning go on to be the coach at Oregon. Well, Sam Pittman, Dan Lanning, and then you talk about Todd Monken moving to the NFL, possibly Glenn Schumann moving to the NFL. This is what it is. I mean, I think one question is what's going to happen with Dell McGee? What's going to happen with Todd Hartley? They're talking about in the future. What opportunities will BMAC have? Brian McClendon. These are all people who have showed excellence in their time at Georgia. And BMAC, not as long a period of time, obviously. But I think people understand Brian McClendon's uh, gravitas, I guess you could say, his ability to do particular things. But it has to be a match. Brian going to the NFL, in my view, would not be his strength. And this may be a misunderstanding of the Brian McClendon situation. I view Brian as a college head coach. Now, when that will be, I don't know, but that's where it views to me because Brian has a personality. Thomas Brown has a personality, but TB has always been pretty serious. So, Brian can attract young men to a program and sell things. And if you don't think so, I mean, how do you get Isaiah and then, Nick and Todd and all these, Keith Marshall? These are all Brian McClendon pulls. And I think that that's what happens. Is Glenn Schumann the same way? And we just don't hear about it as much because these guys play defense. I don't know. So, but there are people in Kirby's programs, excuse me, there are people in Kirby's program that are going to be head coaches one day. There have been people in his program that have become head coaches. I mean, a guy at Carolina, Michigan State, Arkansas, and Oregon. Now, Shane Beamer did not directly leave Georgia, but 3 of those 4 did. And I just think that this is not surprising. I don't think it's anything to overly concern yourself about in terms of the trajectory of Georgia's program, but it's a reality. I think you would move straight forward with Will Muschamp, who has proven himself as a defensive coordinator at a lot of different places. But I think, for Glenn, we'll just see what happens. But that's the news I've got for you today. Thanks for watching.